Okay, good morning. We're learning V'achinu Kol Beis Yisrael, and for Shalema for Sora Baschaya, and for Tzvi ben Leah Miriam. Okay, so we were we're on Tzadik Hey Amid Beis, Tzadik Hey Amid Beis, and we were discussing wines and percentages, and we had a nice chart yesterday that couldn't be embedded in the blog, but it was a very, very good chart. And it really was. It explained everything, was in front of you. And basically, we saw that there's different types of wines, right? We said there's a wine that is sold in the chanus. There's the wine that's sold in the chanus that could be sold in, it's ready right away. It's not, you don't put it away. It's beginning to go ahead and get a little vinegary. And that's the one that's sold the chanus. And then there's you buy wine that is totally good, and if you buy 100 barrels, you got to accept 10 barrels. And we made a distinction between whether when you sold at Martef, whether you mentioned the word lemikba or not. If you mention lemikba, that would guarantee you all good wine, because again, wine that has any odor whatsoever would not be acceptable for cooking. So we're going to go ahead and digress a little bit to discuss wine vis-a-vis brachas. Okay, so we're up to Amar Rav Yehuda. Says Rav Yehuda, we're on Tzadik Hey Amid Beis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines up. Amar Rav Yehuda, Yayin nimcha b'chanos. This yayin that's sold in the chanos, again, that means it begins to smell a little bit like wine, vinegar. It still has the bracha of bari piagafen. That's Rav Yehuda. Rav Chisda Amar, Gabe chamra da akris lamali. Why do I need chamra that's souring? In other words, you're going to make a shahakal niyeh bivarai. So it's machloikis between Rav Chisda and Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says it's still considered wine, and according to Rav Chisda, it loses its shame wine, and now you make a shahakal instead of the special bracha we give for wine, a bari piagafen. Meisevei ala pasha ifsha. Pashta became moldy, bala yayin shehikrid, and yayin that what became sour. But that's going to be the question from that clause. V'al tavshel she'avrut surasei, and v'al tavshel she'avrut surasei. And a tafshel that the tsura went ahead on and it passed by. Tafshel shavat surasai, that it became hichmitz. It said that that's not good. In other words, all these things are not what they're supposed to be. What's the kasha? You see, when it comes to wine that hikris, that wine that became sour, you make a shahako, and not like so. It's a kasha on Rav Yehuda who said you make a bari piagafen. So I'm Rav Svid, Moida Rav Yehuda is Moida. Okay, Mr. Kessler, he didn't call yet. I've contacted him, he never got back to me yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now so we have a kasha. What's the kasha? You have Rabbi Yehuda saying that it's a boyer piagafen, even though it became vinegary. And we have a brisa that seems to say that you make a shahako kasa on the Amoyra of Yehuda, and for the Gemara, it says Moed Rabbi Yehuda b'psoma the mistavna akranasa. He's moida by wine that can only be sold by the crossroads. In other words, there seems to be different dargas of wine. There's wine that is good wine. There's wine that's sold b'chanos, and then there's wine that's so inferior it's just sold by the crossroads. Wherever. Down by the crossroads, right? Wherever it is, it is, and that's where it's sold. And that wine would be a shahako. So Rabbi Yehuda was saying this thing of by piagafen, that's bechanos that really still has its shem yayin. That's agafen. Mashain came where it gets to the point where you have to sell it by where a lot of people are found. The point to the crossroads is that there's a lot of traffic and people are in a rush. They're just going to buy it. Therefore, that wine is shahakal. So that brisa was discussing that wine, and thus it's not shver on the Amoyra Rabbi Yehuda from the brisa. Amoyra by Rabbi Yosef. Rav Yehuda who says bari piagafen on yayin that's sold b'chanos. Rav Chisda who says shahakal on wine that's sold b'chanos. Mar kiman svirule. Who do you hold like? So Abaye asked this Rabbi Yosef, who do you hold like? And Amalei and Rabbi Yosef answered, Masnisan Yodana. I know a brisa. Okay, now the Gemara is going to quote the brisa, but Rabbi Yosef's not talking. Rabbi Yosef simply told Abaye, I know a brisa. Now at the end of the brisa, there's two ways to go. You can either go in the direction of Shahako, or you can go in the direction of Bari Piagofen. But the Gemara is not Rabbi Yosef talking, as we'll see at the end, because the Gemara is going to ask, who does Rabbi Yosef hold like? Now, why is the Gemara asking who does Rabbi Yosef hold like if Rabbi Yosef is the one's talking, right? So again, we're going to bring the brisa in, but Rabbi Yosef is not talking. So we're bringing the brisa in, but Yosef is not the one talking. Now, this brisa is brought in the beginning of Masechta Nida. Masechta Nida, we have a case where a woman finds dam, and we want to know the tyrus that she was touched. How long lemafreya retroactively to go back and say the matama? Okay, so we bring this brisa in the Gemara Nida. If it seems familiar, that's where it's from. The Tanya, haboidik es hachavius liyos mafresh truma. Now this guy, he's got a lot of barrels of wine and whatnot, and it would be a very big pain to go ahead and have to separate trumas and maisa all the time. So what he did was he designated a barrel, and as he used his wine, he would say whatever truma and maisa is on this wine is in this barrel. So therefore, it's not a problem. What happens, however, is the hoylech. So abaydik as obviously as mafish le truma, the hoylech, and he's going on and on. And then he finds what it chaymitz. He finds that that it is vinegar. Now, kol gimel yoim, all 3 days of the bedika, 3 days before the bedika, vadai, anything 3 days before the bedika is considered what? Is considered wine. Any 3 days before the bedika would be considered wine. Mikan ve'elech, from then and onwards, suffik, then it's a suffik. So anything from the time he tasted, anything 3 days before, he would not have to separate truma on, because we know that it was wine. We know it was wine. Anything afterwards, we're going to say that it was a suffix, whether it was wine or not. So that's the question at hand. That's the question at hand. Now, my karma, what exactly did you say? So Rabbi Yochanan, Hafi Kama. Kol Gom Yomim Rishonim, the first 3 days, Vadai Yayin. It's Vadai considered Yayin. Yikan Ve'elech Safik. My time, what's the reason? Chamra Me'iloi Akar. Chamra gets bad from the top. Uvahai Ti'ima, he tasted it, Ve'loi Akar, and it still wasn't bad. In Tim Saloima Basra to Ti'ima Akar, if you're going to say as soon as he closed the barrel after he tasted it, it went bad. Have a Reicha Chala, it would be considered the smell of vinegar, the Taimeham Chamra, and the taste of wine. Because again, the top layer that he tasted, fellas, is it smelled like vinegar, but it still tastes like wine. So anything that smells like vinegar and tastes like wine is still considered wine. And it takes 3 days for what? It takes 3 days for the wine to go bad. It takes 3 days what? For the wine to go bad. Okay, so it takes 3 days for the wine to go bad. So at this point in time, right, as soon as you close the barrel, until 3 days, you know for sure that it's considered wine. Good? For 3 days, you know it's considered wine. Okay. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Amar. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, okay, again, anything that tastes like, smells like vinegar, tastes like wine is wine. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Amar, when it says 3 days, the last 3 days, vadai chaymitz. The last 3 days, vadai chaymitz. And anything that you separated would not be good, because you can't separate from chaymitz on wine, because it's two different minim. Mikan lahalon, anything before will be a suffix. So he's more chamer. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the first 3 days is still good. According to him, none of it's good. The last 3 days for sure not good. And the suffix you're going to have to separate suffix on the previous days. My timer, chamra mitatoy akar. Chamra goes bad from the bottom, right? It goes bad from the bottom. The ema akar, and even though he tasted now, it smells like wine and it tastes a little like wine, but since it smells like vinegar and it tastes like wine, velava datoy, and you don't know that it went bad already from the bottom. Then Tim Suleiman me'ila akar, even going to tell me it went from the top, but tima, he tasted it v'lei akar, dilma busted the tima akar. Maybe after he tasted it, it went bad, and have a reicha chala. The reicha is what is considered chala vinegar. Taimel chamra, and it tastes like wine. And here's where he disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan. For reicha chala, anything that smells like vinegar, v'tima chamra, and tastes like wine, chala is considered vinegar. So there's your machloikas, guys. Guys, I'm speaking now. According to Rabbi Yochanan, anything that smells like vinegar and tastes like wine is considered wine, and therefore, good, we're saying this in truma, but vis-a-vis hilchas brachis, you'd make a bar pri agafen because it still has a lach of wine. Loit Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, that anything that smells like vinegar and tastes like wine is vinegar, and therefore you can make a shahakal. So wine that's sold b'chanus, right, smells like vinegar and tastes like wine. So nimsa, that this brisa tells us that it's a machloikis between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Like Rabbi Yochanan, you're going to make a bayir pri agafen on this wine. Like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, you're going to make a shahako. Now, who Rabbi Yosef holds like, that's going to be discussed in a second. As I told you, Rabbi Yosef is not talking, but we've gone ahead and set the boundaries for exactly what's going on over here. Says the Gemara Vaita. The Ramoy Masni, the Ramoy is the Chachomim in the south of Eretz Yisrael, Masni Mishmei Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rishonim Vada Yayin, they're hybrid. Rishonim is Vada Yayin, Achroinim Vada Chaimitz. And it's so the first 3 days it's Yayin, the last 3 days is Chaimitz, Amsiyoyim Safik, and the middle days are a Safik. So it's kind of a hybrid. Like Rabbi Yochanan in the first 3 days, like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi the last 3 days, and the middle days is a Safik. Now, l'chayr, it's very shver. How could you hold like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and hold like Rabbi Yochanan? Each one says if it smells like vinegar and tastes like wine, each one says a different thing. Phrase Gemara, Hagufa Kasha, the Drumoyi, the people from the Dorim is shver. Amid on one hand, you said Rishonim Vadayayin, Alma Reicha Chala, V'Taima Chamra Chamra. V'Hada Amid Achroinim Vaday Choimitz, Alma Reicha Chala, V'Taima Chamra Chala is Choimitz. Guys, if you tell me the first 3 days it's Vaday, it's good Hafrosh is Truma, because it's wine on wine. Why? Because the smell of vinegar and taste like wine is wine. Conversely, you're also saying, well, the last 3 days is Vadei Chaimitz. Why? Because if it smells like vinegar and tastes like wine, it's what? It's vinegar. How do you go ahead and reconcile the two? And the answer is the latter case is not speaking where it smells like vinegar and tastes like wine. It's vinegar. Says the Gemara, Kigoin the ishtakech chola sakirtaka. You found that the vinegar in the last 3 days was very, very powerful. It's very strong. The lav the oka tilsi yoimi. If not that for 3 days, it already changed already. Like having mishtach chola safiktaka. You wouldn't have found the what so powerful. Okay. So in other words, in the Drumoy, when they said that the last 3 days is vinegar, really they hold if it tastes like wine, if it smells like vinegar, it tastes like wine, it's wine. Again, if it smells like vinegar and tastes like wine, it's wine. Why does the Olam Yeshua ben Levi in the last 3 days? Because it didn't just smell like vinegar. It was really powerful. It was really powerful. Then the last 3 days was gone. Now, Kiman Poshetle, who is Rabbi Yosef Poshet like? I said beautifully, right? Rabbi Yosef wasn't talking. He just told the buyer, I know a brisa. This is the brisa. This omid's the brisa. Now, who does he hold like? Does he hold like Rabbi Yochanan and it's a boy Priya Gofen? Or does he hold like the Acher, or holds like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and it's what is Shahako? So Polibor of Moriv Rav Zvid, they argue, Chadamak Rabbi Yochanan. One says he holds like Rabbi Yochanan and it's Hagofen. The Chadamak Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and it's Shahako. Okay, so you have Klul Chlei, that's what he held. Itmar. Hamoicha Chovius Yayin Lechaveroi, Vich Mitzah. You sell a chavius of wine to your friend, Vich Mitzah, and now on, it goes bad. Amarav, Kol Gilma Yomer Rishonim, Birishus Moicher. The first 3 days, and it goes bad, then it's a mekach tois, because again, it takes 3 days, and if it's vinegar already, it went bad already. Gimel Rishonim Birishus Moicher, Mikan Ve'elech, Birishus Lekeach. Mikan Ve'elech, it's bad in the Birishus Lekeach. And therefore, so again, first 3 days, just consistent, right? It's already changed. Last 3 days, no. If it didn't go bad yet, and then when he sold it to you, he sold it to you with wine, and it went bad in your rishos. Shmuel says, "Chamra akatva de mare shavar." Literally, the wine on the shoulder of the master shavar. What does that mean? Says Rashbam, Shmuel Amar, Eina chayiv rechiyusan. The moicher is never chayiv to pay up. Afa pisha hichmitz b'toich chavius shel moicher, even though it became chametz, vinegar in the hands of the moicher. Mishum the chamra agba de gava shavar. What does that mean? Al kitafa odam midalig kleimar mazloi goyrim. It's the bad mazel of the lekeach that caused it to go bad. Hate shel balayayin. It's the fate of the owner of the wine. Kedanaf golil kaman midachsiv af ki yayin boygate. The hilkach pata moiche, the moiches pata. The amlei moichel lekeach lasa didach kagorim. Your bad mazel caused this. Kach shemati mirabenu zikni b'bava mitzia. Says Rashbam, I heard from my grandfather Rashi. I have a kach makasi b'tshuvas hagainim v'chein yikar. So if he sells you wine and it turns out to be vinegar, even if it's within the first 3 days, the lekeach's taking a loss because it's your bad mazel. Good? It's your bad mazel. Now, the lotion of kataf, carrying on your shoulder, is interesting, right? You're telling me it doesn't really mean that literally. It means what? It means your bad mazel. If you look at Tosfos, the Tosfos Shmuel Machamra Katfe, where the lines get semi-wide, go down, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down. It's towards the end of the line. V'nira lefarish l'Rabbeinu Tam. V'nira lefarish l'Rabbeinu Tam. Chamra katve de gavra shavar kloimar hayayin kimin shenasu b'ktafim. Since the lakeach carried it on his shoulder, his skalkala, it became ruined. Al yedei shenaneya, that because he was shaking it up. Umir lahachmitz, and therefore it quickly went ahead and became chametz. In other words, had you left the wine just as is, if you left the wine just as is, yes, then it would have been okay. It would take 3 days. But by you going ahead and carrying it and it's shuckling up and down, that goes ahead and intensifies and makes it go quicker, accelerates the word I wanted. It accelerates the process of it becoming chaymitz, and therefore, even within 3 days, since you, the lekeach, carried it, right, then it became chaymitz. So therefore the moicha doesn't have to make it up. So according to Rashbam, it's more of a spiritual thing to do with your bad luck, with your bad mazel. Your avera caused it. According to the Rabbeinu Tam, it's a very physical thing. Imamish literally means shuckling on your shoulder, and therefore it went bad quicker than it should have, and therefore it's your loss. Good.
But it wouldn't be part of the sale. The moicha, you're not leaving in the moicha's rishus. It's automatically, it's part of the sale. You're going to move it.
Again, maybe there's a different way of moving it that should be shuckled this way. It could be there's a different way of transporting it, but it may be transported in this way. Of Rabbi Yosef of the Kavase de Rav, that within 3 days it's the loss of the moicher. After 3 days, the loss of the keach. B'shikra, he did it by beer. With Kavase de Shmuel by wine. B'chamra, he said that even right away. The Hilchas Kavase de Shmuel, Shna Shmuel, they make a difference whether there's wine or beer. Rav made a distinction, right? Wine or beer, and Shmuel, the halacha is like Shmuel, and that's the Tosfos you just did. That like when you buy the wine and the wine you take, I guess you must have. Dove, you must have tasted it before you took it out. You must know it was wine. Then all of a sudden, shoin, it's chaymitz, it's your problem. Tan Rabbanan, echad shechet tamarim, whether it's date beer. Guys, have you ever tasted date beer? My son-in-law once brought it home for Pesach because regular beer is chametz, but date beer is not. I said, if you ever do this again, I will never let you in my house again. It was like from the most meistic things you ever tasted in your life. So date beer, the echad shechet sa'arim, that's what we're used to, beer made from barley. The echad shmarei yayin, or whether it's shmarei yayin, whether it's leads of wine. So in other words, you had the grape peels, which are called leads, and it sinks to the bottom, and then you went ahead, you took it out, and you threw water on top of it. This is again in our sugya. All these cases, the bracha you're going to make is the bracha shahakol. Okay, so this is the discussion. Forget beer. Let's discuss the leads. We have the shmarim, the grape peels, and you're putting water on top of it. But the extract that comes out after it strains, if it tastes like, according to the Tanakama, whatever comes out, it doesn't make a difference. It's a shahakol. According to Acherim, if it tastes like wine, it's going to be a borei pri hagafen. Good? It's going to be a borei pri hagafen. Rabbi Rav Yosef Damat Shavayu. Ein halacha ka'acherim, meaning you're always going to make a shahakol. Always going to make a shahakol. The acherim say if it tastes like wine, it's a gafen. No, now, just remember, fellas, Rab's dilution of wine was 3 parts water to 1 part wine, 3 to 1. His ratio, the wine in those days was very, very concentrated, and Rab's mazug, the lashon mazug dilution was 3 parts to 1. Right? We discussed this many times. Now, Amar Rava says Rava. So again, we have a machlokes, guys. If you take water, you throw it on leads, it tastes like wine. Says the Tanakama, it's a shehakol. Says the Acherim, it's a borei pri hagafen. Rava is now coming to qualify that machlokes. Amar Rava, the Kuli Alma, everybody holds Rama Tilsa Viasa Arba. If you threw 3, let's pick a loig. You throw 3 loigin of water, and it came out 4 loigin. So in other words, clearly extract came out from the leads because you're getting more than you put in, and it's the ratio of what? 3 to 1. Chamrahu. Everyone, even the Tanakama would be Maida, in this case, going to make Agafen. Good? Guys, good. You took 3 loigin of water, you dumped it on a bunch of leads, it came out 4 loigin, so clearly you're getting more than you put in. Where's it coming from? It's coming out from the leads. It's a 3 ratio, 3 parts water to 1 part leads, which is grapes. Now that's wine. Everyone, even the Tanakama would be Maida, you make a borei pri hagafen. And Rava letamei dama Rava kol chamra d'leidori al chad plas maya, any chamra, any wine that cannot go ahead and stand on 3 parts of water, lav chamrahu. But once it could, that ratio of 3 to 1, that's a gafen. Rami tilsa vasa tilsa v'leklum. Who? You put in 3 leads, 3 loigin, and it came out 3 loigin. Even the Acherim would say over there, it's a shahakol. Guys, you hear? 3 and comes out 3, shahakol. 3 comes out 3, shahakol. Ki pligi, when's the machlokes? The Rama tilsa, the Asa tilsa upalga. You went ahead, you threw in 3 and came out 3.5. Now, you could view this as what? That 3 parts of 3.5, it's a ratio of 3.5 to, right? 3.5 to 1. 3.5 to 1 is not a good ratio. So therefore, Rabbanan Savri, Tilsa Ayel, Tilsa Nafik. 3 went in, 3 parts of water went in, 3 parts of water came out. So how much wine do you have? Pashle Palga, you have a half of wine left over. Upalga Beshisa Palga Maya Leklumu. The ratio of 1/2 to 3 is 1/6. Right? 3 times 1/2 is a sixth. The ratio of 5 to 1, guys, is not wine. The ratio here is 5 to 1. That's not wine. You need a ratio of 3 to 1. So that's the Tanakama. And therefore, if you throw down 3 and it comes out 3.5, the ratio is 5 to 1. All you're going to go ahead is make a shahakol. Uvacherim savre, tilsa oil, you put in 3, and now comes out 3.5. But of those 3.5, right, tarta trei upalganofik, a half of the water is being absorbed in the leads. So from those 3.5, guys, you're getting a full loig of wine. So you have a ratio of 1 to 2.5. Again, 3.5 is coming out. The Acherim hold of that half, it stayed in 1/2 of the water stayed inside. So if you took 3 and threw it in, and 3.5 came out, of that 3.5, 2.5 is what? Is water, and the other 1 is wine. So your ratio is 2.5 to 1. 2.5 to 1 is agafen. Again, 3 to 1 is agafen. So certainly 2.5 to 1 is agafen. So again, you took in 3, you threw it in. 3.5 came out. What constituted that 3.5? The Tanakama holds 3 parts water, a half a part what of wine. The ratio therefore is 5 to 1. According to the Acherim, when you throw in 3 and 3.5 comes out, it's not pshat 3 is water. Only 2.5 is water. The other, you have a full of the 3.5, you have a total 1 of wine. So therefore, it's 2.5 to 1. 2.5 to 1 is hagafen. So therefore, b'cherim sava tilsa oil tartu palganafik poshle kuza. You have left over a cup. The kuza betray palga chamram al yahu, and one kuz, 1 cup betray palga, and 2.5 is what chamram alga.